and let us worship.
Good morning. Our story this morning is Giving Thanks by Jonathan London. Thank you, Mother Earth. Thank you, Father Sky. Thank you for this day. This is what my father says every morning standing in the fields near our house. Like his indigenous friends, singers and storytellers, Dad believes that the things of nature are a gift, and that in return we must give something back. We must give thanks. He gives thanks to the frogs and the crickets singing down by the creek, and to all the tiny beings with 6 or 8 legs weaving their tiny stories close to the earth. He says thank you to chanterelles, the wild mushrooms that smell like pumpkins. He says thank you to the trees that wave their arms and spin their leaves in the breeze. He says thank you, fox, at a glimpse in the tall grass, the pointy ears, the bushy tail dancing. He says thank you to the deer who have passed this way, their tracks like 2 fingers pressed in the dirt, pointing toward water. He gives thanks to the quail, who flare up and scatter and rejoin. He says, thank you, Jackrabbit, as it zigs and zags and jumps and leaps 25 feet through the air, racing a shadow. He says, thank you, Hawk, as it circles high in the sky and cries, scree, scree, before it dives. He says, thank you, Grandfather Sun, as it begins to sink beyond the hills. Thank you for this day. He says, thank you, Grandmother Moon, for coming this way. To me, it's a little embarrassing to say thanks to trees and things, but Dad says it becomes a habit, and it makes you feel good. Thank you, stars, I say, as we near home, and the stars come out one by one, as if from hiding. And if you'll join us in singing the first verse of this little light of mine, we'll head downstairs.
Lots going on in the life of the church. In a week and a half, we have our next Wonderful Wednesday program, and we're combining that with Rockford Urban Ministries' annual Peace Lecture. Stanley Campbell, the executive director of Rockford Urban Ministries, has invited 2 nuns who regularly visit immigrants who are in detention centers to tell about what they've seen and their stories. I think these are really important stories for us to hear and know about what's happening in our country and in this season. So that's on the 5th of December 6 o'clock, I think, here at the church. I was going to encourage folks to pick up an ornament from the Meld donation tree to purchase items for families who might be in need this holiday season. And then I looked at the tree and I said to Lindsay, "Where's all the ornaments?" She said, "Oh, people took them last week. There's only one left. There's one left, so you can grab that one. But if you did pick up an ornament, thank you, and you can bring that back." And Meld is happy to also take your money, which they make a lot of good with to serve folks in need. The offering this morning we'll share with Cornucopia Food Pantry. Volunteers from this church have been working with Cornucopia Food Pantry for 20 years, 25 years, serving the hungry in our community on a regular basis. And over the last 10 years, the number of folks who come for food has grown substantially. And your generosity this morning goes a long way to feed our siblings in need this season. The offering will now be given and received. I invite you into a spirit of centering and meditation and prayer. This is that brief moment between one holiday and the beginning of the rush of the next. And for a moment before the snow starts to fall and before the lights get bright and Monday comes again, I invite us to pause, to breathe. If you want to roll back your shoulders, place your fingers together, perhaps. Breathe. The Spirit of life and love is with you all the time. In you and amongst us, we forget. We get so busy, so worried and nervous. Breathe. Spirit means breath. Remember, I invite you into the silence that you might be still, pray, or hold in your heart all that you are grateful for this day. May the blessings of peace and love be in us and amongst us this day and every day. Amen. I think you all needed that as much as I did. You stretched that longer than usual. That's what you needed. Pay attention to what you need. Don't let them distract you. And we're going to sing together. It's a very simple song many of you will be familiar with, From You I Receive, to You I Give, written by the brothers Nathan and Joseph Siegel, two rabbis, to remind us that it is from one another that we live. So I invite you to rise and by your spirit. We're going to sing this through twice. If you want to do your own little round or harmony and you know what to do with that, that's okay. But others should just sing it through twice. Let's sing. Be seated. A reading this morning from my colleague Kathy McTeague entitled Tending the Secret Garden. It was a soggy November morning. The leaves had all fallen from the trees and the woods were darkened by days of rain. A high overcast dimmed the sun, so everything in sight reflected the dulled colors of early winter, brown and gray, drab greens, and faded yellows. It was a disheartening scene, with the promise of weeks more to come until the winter snow would soften the lines and lift the light. Then, as I stared through the window at this bleak view, feeling more than a little dull and gray myself, a pair of bluebirds flew to a branch directly at eye level, flashing almost neon in their brightness. The bluebird of happiness has never been an image that worked very well for me, much too saccharine, like those awful yellow smiley face buttons. Yet I have to admit, my heart did a little flip-flop of joy when those beautiful creatures lit up the landscape. They danced their jaunty bird jig on the branch for a few minutes and then flew away, but the landscape held a sheen I hadn't noticed before, a little backwash of light left behind. On the wall above my desk, I keep a favorite quote by Sarah Brennack. Both abundance and lack exist simultaneously in our lives as parallel realities. It is always our conscious choice which secret garden we will tend. So often we take meticulous care of the garden of dissatisfaction, cultivated from every lack in our lives. We leave its gate wide open and we wander in each morning almost before we're fully awake, already sorry for ourselves because we didn't sleep well again, or the weather is foul, or the work feels like too much of a grind. We linger in the garden of dissatisfaction, usually without even noticing we've made a choice. We return again and again to the unkempt and extravagant growth of our favorite gripes, some of them many years old and still full of whining vigor. But there's another garden growing right alongside this one, and just a small shift of perspective tumbles us into its grace. In the garden of abundance, the landscape overflows with the ordinary miracles that shimmer through each day we are privileged to walk in this world. This garden grows easily, it blossoms freely, and its richness awaits us each time we open our eyes to see it. Life, breath, kindness, friends, love, bluebirds, all the bounty given to us by every unfolding day. In the garden of abundance, the bare branches against the November overcast become a blessing, not because of the bluebirds that lighted there for a moment, but because of the branches themselves exist, and we have the eyes to see them, outlined against the soft, beautiful gray of the sky. Which secret garden will you tend today?
Mary, Peggy, and I are your leftovers for this month of gratitude. As a child, all of my holidays were spent on my Irish grandparents' farm, which meant years of sharing stories and feasting. The stories that were traditionally repeated every year can still bring a smile and a tear. The do you remember whens, which make the family legends survive, such as, do you remember when Grandpa started farming full-time when he was in 4th grade after his dad committed suicide? Or when my once skinny grandma was married in a borrowed dress, which was too big for her frame, so she put towels in it to fill her shape in. Or when my own parents were first married and they took the lost turkey carcass up to their bedroom in the night. or the war stories, and a lot about Harry Truman. These stories and many more were greatly anticipated every year until it was my turn to hear a story about me, which was usually the time when I was about 3 years old. I shook my finger at my grandpa for correcting me and told him, "Grandpa, you don't talk to me that way." Thanksgiving was a huge feast of vegetables from the garden, but the main stars were the meats and the sweets. The turkey held center stage and took up most of the decision-making, recipe hunting, preparation time, and planning, but always ended up to be the same delicious bird. The sweets consisted of a variety of delectables, which we kids could have made the whole meal if the adults weren't watching closely. When it was time to pack up the leftovers, we always were careful about splitting up the meat. But the sweets were up for grabs, some hidden in secret places in the refrigerator and in our satchels. It's been almost 50 years since I enjoyed this idyllic time at the farm with family which overflowed with love and joy in living it. I remain grateful for their memories of their humor, their stories, and their resilience. Today, another type of family is offering similar opportunities for our gratitude through its stories, meats, and sweets. It's only been a bit over 3 years that Ed and I have been attending this faith community regularly. But this church offers a special kind of feast for us through the shared stories, meaningful learning, and welcoming energies. The UU stories are evolving for us as we share history, trauma, and joys. The do you remember whens are emerging, such as when a local church gave us their sanctuary when 2 men died in our church grounds, and when the UU minister helped engage an interfaith community in the morning of a shooting in a Jewish community, and when the music was so powerful, so very powerful, Maya Angelou tribute, that the very church heard Maya's message with great clarity. Many of the UU folks have do you remember whens, which can be joyful times like a wedding, or other times when saying goodbye to a loved one. Ed and I, at this age, are just starting to build our own UU stories. The meat comes in a variety of weekly services and many social action groups, which are full of information and inspiration, where we have opportunities for self-reflection, meditation, and learning how to best live this life. The sweets are enjoyed in many unpredictable ways, like chatting with someone in the after-service coffee for the first time, sharing social times inside and outside of the church. The best sweets enjoyed in the many talents, humor, and commitments of this very active congregation. Thank you all for becoming akin to our second family. I hope to give back as gratitude for what has been so openly given. Thank you.
Good morning. On the subject of leftovers, for the first 40 years of my married life, Dave and I were the Thanksgiving hosts. 40 years because my mom lived a long life, and everyone came home to be with her. On the day after, I could never find joy in turning the turkey carcass into soup. But I did it. Nowadays, I'm the only one who wants to take that carcass home. Societal change? Or just me? I did grow up in the Depression with a capital D, when every scrap was used, nothing thrown away. Nothing thrown away. In Toronto 2 weeks ago, I asked my daughter and son-in-law what they thought about leftovers. They are a Unitarian Catholic family. From the Bible, Richard filled me in on the marriage at Cana, where Jesus turned water into wine. "You have kept the best until last," was his quote. And he mentioned the miracle of the 7 loaves and fishes, and he compared the turkey, the centerpiece of our Thanksgiving, to the cornerstone that Jesus laid, the cornerstone of his faith. Richard is an incredibly sharp man, and his mind leapt all over this subject all day. Later, he gave me a quote he found on Jill's desk, one she said she'd found in the Toronto Unitarian Bulletin, and one which she told me is very much a cornerstone of her life, something she tries to remember every morning. It's by Naomi Klein, a Canadian author and social activist, who writes, "The task is clear: to create a culture of caretaker in which no one and nowhere is thrown away, in which the inherent value of people and all life is fundamental. Again, in which no one and nowhere is thrown away." So, soup. Soup really is a metaphor for not throwing away. It's a metaphor for creating, melding all those tastes together, for experimenting. Why not a little sherry or an extra wisp of thyme? For comfort, warmth, and nourishment. For linking, add those aging carrots and the sprouting onion. For communion, why not share with friends? It's a simple gift. While I still love bringing home the carcass to make soup, it's the memories of family being together, the chance to talk with each other and catch up, the certainty I can bring a friend who's alone, the warmth that are primary. I particularly remember the first holiday after my mom died. It was also the first holiday we welcomed Richard into the family. Daughter Ellen's blessing so beautifully melded those two events that I wrote a poem. It's called "When Poppies Open in the Snow." In candlelight, my daughter reads a poem, her face framed by a darkened window, hair afire, cheeks a kitchen rose, and poppies open in the snow. Her words springing like water, pulsing from a well, their aim true as geese who came to listen on the roof, or the pelican who blazes into waves for prey. She pauses, passing the gravy, to let us see the poppies, feel the wing beat of the geese, worship the water, hear the pelican, all the while coaxing out stars. So I treasure my memories, make the soup, and try to work to be part of a society in which no one and nowhere is thrown away. Thanks.
Good morning again. Leftovers and gratitude are not words that we usually think of together. We are generally grateful for something shiny and new, a promotion, a new car, or we are grateful for something that is basic and fundamental, such as family, the earth, clean water, and nutritious food, now excluding romaine lettuce, of course. These are the mashed potatoes, the dressing, the green bean casserole, and for some, the turkey in life. But with the celebrated turkey and dressing are the leftovers. Collateral damage, if you will, that we repurpose, make the best of, and sometimes, like Mary's soup, we can make better. In our lives, these are the challenges, the disappointments, the setbacks, the things that didn't work out as planned, and even the failures that make us who we are and make us better, the work that our resilience muscle and make it stronger. There is room for gratitude here as well. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Cultivate the habit of being grateful for every good thing that comes to you, and to give thanks continuously. And because all things have contributed to your advancement, you should include all things in your gratitude." 1998 was one of the most challenging years of my life, and a year for which I am extremely grateful. I was a single mom trying to make ends meet, managing a son and daughter in high school and a daughter in college, when I learned that Gretchen, my 15-and-a-half-year-old daughter, was pregnant. Not only was she pregnant, but she was 8 months along. Of course, this limited choices and required an immediate response. Through my doubt of what kind of mother am I, that I would not realize that my daughter was pregnant until the 8th month. And the heartbreak of what I thought would be the impossibility of raising the child ourselves. I quickly took her to a doctor because she had had no medical checkups. This doctor told me about a home for pregnant teens on a campus of a hospital in Indiana, about 25 minutes from our home, which we visited that same day. I received a lot of resistance and anger when I advised Gretchen that she would be staying there until the baby was born. But I did visit her every day. Over the course of living there, her C-section and her stay at the hospital, the future of this baby boy, who became known as Tyler, changed rapidly from a loving couple who would adopt him to the other grandmother saying she would adopt him. There were a lot of tears, anger, frustration, uncertainty for both of us, and continuing doubt on my part. As it worked out, he now had a home with his grandmother in Champaign, Illinois. He did, however, remain in our lives as he was growing up. A few weeks later, one of the other girls from the home where Gretchen had stayed had given birth and was giving her baby up for adoption. Gretchen wanted to go see her in the hospital and gave her such compassionate support. What a great gesture. Then when school started, Gretchen was enrolled in a marriage and family class. I remember that she had gotten up in front of the class to share her story, and the last sentence was, "I'm 16 and I'm a mom." Sometimes challenges not only make us grow up quickly, but in this case, Gretchen owned it. I was so proud of her then, as I am now. She has since become an ultrasound technician, married a wonderful man, and is an amazing mother to a 7-year-old and 3-year-old twin daughters. Life's challenges. Another reason to be grateful for them is that challenges often necessitate change, and change can take you to a better place. We all have heard stories of the person that loses a job and uses the challenge as an opportunity to pursue their passion, and after a great deal of work and many tears, is much more satisfied in the long run. Despite the challenge, the ultimate outcome is better than you would have hoped for. I have relived this time in my life while writing this testimony, and I was not feeling the gratitude then that I feel now. I've learned that it may not feel good while going through tough times, but there is always something to be grateful for, and to love when it's the hardest thing to do. find gratitude in all things. So now flash forward 20 years. Tyler has had his challenges too. However, he has grown into a kind, funny, creative young man. When he turned 18, he moved in with his mom and her family and is going to college. He is a joy to be around, and when I'm there twice a week to watch the twins, he walks into the room with his arms open wide, folds me in them, and gives the most outstanding hugs.
I am deeply grateful for all the worship associates, for Mary and Diane and Peggy, for sharing their stories and their thoughts about gratitude. I'm particularly grateful that their stories are not, as Kathleen McTeague writes, saccharine versions of bluebirds on trees, as if everything was always easy, as if there was no hardship or loss, or if that gratitude is only the privilege of people who've got it all greased and good to go. For what we know is true is that sometimes it's hard. And it is through resilience and community and mercy and hope that we find what is truly good and worthy of praise. I invite you all to rise in body or spirit. We're going to sing We Gather Together, which is 349 in your gray hymnal. The words are also up here. In a moment, I'll extinguish our chalice, and then read our benediction. We'll sing our closing blessing. As a congregation that welcomes many ways of being in the world, I invite you to join hands together if you wish, or clasp your hands if it's okay if others put their hands on your shoulders, or cross your arms if you'd rather not be touched this morning. All that's okay. I'll extinguish our chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us until we are together again. Our theme for December is peace. And so I invite you to take deep breaths this week and be ready to think about what it means to live and be peace in the world. The words of our benediction from the Universalist poet May Sarton help us to be the always hopeful gardeners of the Spirit, who know that without darkness, nothing comes to birth, as without light, nothing flowers. We'll sing together our closing blessing.